Welcome back to Hardball. Well, the Hawks are divided now, not about whether we should get back into the middle of a religious war in Iraq. Oh, no. They agree on that one. We should get back in. But on the question of whether the United States should engage Iran in an effort to calm the situation in Iraq, well, the fault lines are a bit less clear here. On Monday, a senior American diplomat met in Vienna with a top Iranian diplomat to discuss the situation in Iraq and see if there is any common ground to pursue. And many Republicans slammed that move as naive. Here was Speaker John Boehner today answering a question about whether the United States should cooperate with Iran to try to bring peace to Iraq.
No, absolutely not. I can just imagine what our friends in the region, our allies, would be thinking by reaching out to Iran at a time when they continue to pay for terrorists and foster terrorism, not only in Syria and in Lebanon, but in Israel as well.
Well, the issue has split the two leading hawks in the U.S. Senate, Senator John McCain and, of course, Senator Lindsey Graham. They're often called the two amigos. But on Sunday, Senator Graham said he was in favor of dialogue with Iran.
Why did we deal with Stalin? Because he was not as bad as Hitler. The Iranians can provide some assets to make sure Baghdad doesn't fall. We need to coordinate with the Iranians, and the Turks need to get in the game and get the Sunni Arabs back into the game, form a new government without Maliki. But yes, I don't want Iran to dominate Iraq, and that's where they're headed. Don't let the Iranians save Baghdad. Let us save Baghdad so there'll be a chance at a second government.
Figure that one out. Work with Iran, but don't let them win. On Monday, Senator McCain put out a statement saying, quote, "It would be the height of folly to believe that the Iranian regime can be our partner in managing the deteriorating situation or security situation in Iraq. The reality is U.S. and Iranian interests and goals do not align in Iraq, and greater Iranian intervention would only make the situation dramatically worse." Clarence Page is a columnist with the Chicago Tribune, and John Fury is a Republican strategist. Gentlemen, I want to start with Clarence. Everybody you talk to says that Iran's all over Iraq. Everybody deals with them. Everybody talks to them. But now they're acting like, I mean, Boehner, let's talk Turkey here politically. Nobody in politics wants to be caught in bed with Iran, which is known by everybody who cares about Israel as their #1 geopolitical threat. Right. You don't want to be dirtied with that, because down the road, 20 years from now, 10 years from now, we're going to have a gigantic threat of Iran in that region. Mm-hmm. And Israel's going to have to face them, and we'll have to face them. Right. Nobody wants to be in bed with them. But guys like, for some reason, Lindsey Graham's taking that chance. Well, what's going on in this fight on the right?
I got a theory. I mean, you've got John McCain, the fighter pilot. You've got Lindsey Graham, the military lawyer. I think Lindsey Graham is looking for avenues here where we can work something out that will not require the United States to come in militaristically. And also, he's looking at the reality of the fact that who was the big winner in the Iraq War? Iran. Of course. You know, right? You've got a Shia government in charge. You've got Maliki, who won't cooperate all the way with us and has alienated the Sunnis and helped to feed the ISIS indirectly. And also, Iran is worried about being surrounded by Sunnis from Saudi Arabia and from Iraq. So, you know, I could see why Lindsey Graham would be looking for some avenues here. We're already talking to Iran about the nuclear negotiations, and and there are some side talks about what might be done about the ISIS. So he'd like to get more out of that avenue.
So we go into Iraq back in 2003, John, and that's always going to be controversial. I think it should. And we basically put, because we have democracy there, we let the largest group take over by democracy, sure, and it's going to be the Shia. Now, the Shia, of course, are aligned religiously with the Iranians. They have differences, of course, historically, but they are aligned in religious terms. And when the Sunnis come through killing Shia, as they are right now, in this ISIS crowd, obviously the Shia in Iran are sympathetic to the Shia in Baghdad. So what's the United States do? Some people say let Iran help us in this fight to save the Baghdad regime. Your thoughts?
Well, I'm with McCain and Boehner. I think that, and I think Lindsey Graham eventually got to it. I thought his comments on CNN were a little bit convoluted. You don't necessarily want to make it easier for the Iranians to thoroughly dominate Baghdad. And I think that giving too much cooperation to the Iranians will do that. I mean, Chris, your point is well taken. Iran already has a lot of influence in Iraq, and when we pulled out of there, it made it easier for the Iranians to have even more influence. And what John Boehner Boehner was saying, our allies, not only the Israelis, but also the Saudis. If we go too overboard in cooperating with the Iranians, it drives the Saudis bonkers. And so I think that this is a very delicate game here. I think that John McCain and John Boehner have the politics right, and I think they also have the policy right.
Anyway, in their column today in the Wall Street Journal, Dick and Liz Cheney had this to say about the president's effort to engage Iran. Quote, in a move that defies credulity, he toys, that's the president, with the idea of ushering Iran into Iraq. Only a fool would believe American policy in Iraq should be ceded to Iran, the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism. You know, I have to ask a profound question, but I respect both of you guys. So let's step back from this crap we're looking at right now. The British and the French, back after World War II, thought they could decide all those countries. They drew the map. Churchill, my hero, drew the map. They said to Sykes-Picot, these guys, this will be Iraq, this will be Transjordan, this will be whatever. Right. And they sort of figured we Europeans, the white guys, can decide these things. Mm-hmm. And for a while it worked, and they ended up accepting that. Well, no longer are they accepting these lines anymore. And yet we're still being accused of not controlling events in that part of the region our way. I'm just wondering, do we have any influence really? In the end, once we got rid of that Iraq government, we just knocked it off. I didn't agree with it, we knocked it off. Once Libya became a mess, once Syria became this crazy chaos, do we really have any influence in what that's going to look like? Why don't we stop kidding ourselves that we can control events in that part of the world? I don't think we can.
The difference between influence and control. No, we can't control events in that part of the world. We can influence them, especially when it comes to something that affects our interests. And that can be kind of hazy outside of oil to what our interests are.
How do we influence the Shia to stop killing the Sunni because the Sunni are killing the Shia? How do we stop that?
Well, on the ground, as far as the violence between them, we have very little control over that. But when it comes to the leadership, we do have some influence. They've all got interests. I mean, you know, people are starting to recognize the wisdom of Joe Biden's original idea of dividing Iraq up into three.
Well, they're doing a pretty good job of that.
Exactly, that's what's happening because of just what you said. Those artificial lines were drawn long ago, and now people are reverting back to their basic tribal politics. But there are ways for us to influence it. It's just that the way, you know, there are no good alternatives right now.
Okay, here's John. Here's my question. How do you stop the Shia government of Iran, in Tehran, from helping its fellow Shia government in Baghdad? What do we have to say about that? If they want to help them, they're going to help them.
Well, you're right about that, Chris. I think Clarence makes an excellent point. You know, we're in the middle of this huge civil war between the Sunnis and the Shia. It's been happening for generations, but it's getting to a fever point right now. And we don't want to put America in the middle where they both start pounding on us. So I think that's part of this. But what Clarence is right about is you want to see if you can somehow influence the leaders to bring them together. And, you know, I think that we got into Iraq. We can disagree whether that was the right thing to do by knocking off Hussein. That it was kind of a force of stability. Now we've got the situation which is almost unmanageable, and you know, there's no real good easy ways to get out of it, but it does require diplomacy, and I think it's a mistake just to wash our hands of it. America shouldn't just kind of turn away, because then it affects our own interests, and as Clarence once again said, it'll have an impact on oil prices.
Well, nothing appalled me more than when they took those three guys out of the truck and asked them to say their prayers so they could find out whether they're Sunni or Shia, and then executed them on the spot.
That's right.
It reminded me of a horrific version of what happened in Northern Ireland back a couple of years ago, when they would grab these people at a bar and they'd say, "Can you say the rosary?" And if they were Protestant kids and they couldn't, so they beat them up. This is a hell of a lot worse.
Tribal politics at its worst.
Hell of a lot worse. Thank you. In the name of God, by the way.
You got it.
Anyway, Clarence Page, gentlemen. Thank you, John Fury. Thank you both, gentlemen. Up next, the story behind the man who knew more than anyone else about Bo Bergdahl. And this is Hardball, the place for politics.